My name is Lena Voss. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, my family treated me like a placeholder. Not bad enough to complain about. Not important enough to remember. Just there, filling a seat at the table, keeping things from feeling lopsided. My younger sister, Gwen, was the one they built their dreams around. Gwen with the singing voice, Gwen with the prom court photo on the mantle, Gwen whose college acceptance letter my mom actually framed and hung in the hallway next to the family portraits. Mine was in a drawer somewhere. Maybe. I stopped looking. I don't say this to make you feel sorry for me. I say it because it's the truth. And the truth is what finally set everything on fire at my cousin's 4th of July barbecue, right between the potato salad and the first round of fireworks. But I'll get back to that. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the steady one. My mom called me her little workhorse, which she meant as a compliment and which landed like a boot on my chest every single time. Gwen needed encouragement. Gwen needed extra patience, extra money for voice lessons, extra emotional bandwidth for her big feelings and her bigger dreams. I just needed to not cause problems. When I graduated high school with the highest GPA in my class, my mom said, "That's my girl," and moved on to asking Gwen if she'd heard back from the talent agency she'd submitted a reel to. When Gwen didn't get a call back, we spent a week tiptoeing around the house so she could grieve in peace. I got a full academic scholarship to study architecture. My dad said, "Architecture, huh?" in the tone people use when they're trying to remember where they parked. I built a life while they were watching someone else's highlight reel. The irony of being invisible in your own family is that it gives you an enormous amount of time to think, to work, to build quietly without anyone second-guessing you or asking too many questions. I designed my first real structure, a community arts center in a Rust Belt town in Ohio, at 24. It won a regional award. I told my parents over dinner. My mom said, "Oh wow, honey," then asked if Gwen should try a different photographer for her headshots. My business partner, a brilliant structural engineer named Omar, and I had been running our small firm, Voss and Callum, for 3 years by the time any of it started to matter to the people in my family. We built a reputation for sustainable design, work that balanced beauty and function in ways that bigger firms with bigger budgets kept trying to replicate. We'd turned down a buyout once already because the timing wasn't right and the offer wasn't big enough. The second time someone came to the table, the timing was perfect and the number made my hand shake. But that happened quietly, the way most things in my life happened, while my family was busy watching someone else. The 4th of July has always been the one holiday my extended family actually shows up for. My Aunt Carol hosts it every year at her house in Connecticut, with the big backyard and the above-ground pool and the fold-out tables that wobble if you lean on them wrong. Everyone comes. My parents, my sister, my uncle and his wife, my cousins, their kids, assorted neighbors and plus ones who've been coming long enough to feel like family. It's the kind of gathering that feels warm from a distance and a little suffocating up close. My cousin Derek, not Derek from the name file, a different Derek. My cousin had just gotten promoted to regional director at some insurance firm, and Aunt Carol had made it very clear in the group chat that this year's barbecue was also, quote, "a little celebration for Derek's big win." My mom had sent back 3 fire emojis and a trophy. She'd sent me a separate text 2 days earlier. "Will you bring a dessert? Something easy. I know you've been busy. Something easy. I know you've been busy." I made the cheesecake anyway because I genuinely like baking and because it gave my hands something to do on the drive up that wasn't gripping the steering wheel too hard. I pulled into Aunt Carol's driveway in the same gray Civic I'd been driving since grad school. Not because I couldn't afford better. I bought a different car 3 weeks prior. I drove the Civic on purpose. I had a feeling about how this day was going to go, and I wanted to arrive looking exactly like the version of me they'd already decided I was. Inside, it smelled like sunscreen and charcoal and my grandmother's perfume. Kids ran through the back hallway shrieking about something. My uncle's laugh boomed from the kitchen. I found my mom near the drink table, pouring lemonade into a plastic cup, and she gave me a side hug with her free hand. You made it. Did you bring something? Cheesecake. Where do you want it? She pointed to the dessert table and immediately turned to wave at my aunt across the yard. I carried the cheesecake over alone. Gwen arrived 20 minutes after me, and I watched the energy in the room shift slightly, the way it always did. She's not malicious, my sister. She didn't do anything deliberately. She just moved through rooms with this easy brightness that made people gravitate toward her, and my parents were the first in every orbit. She found me by the chipbowl and gave me a real hug, the kind where she actually held on for a second. You look good, she said. Are you sleeping? Enough, I said. You? Barely. I've been doing this intensive vocal coaching program and it wrecks your sleep schedule. She launched into the details and I listened because I love my sister even when I'm exhausted by the dynamic we were born into. She didn't create it. Neither did I. My cousin Derek found me about an hour in. He's a year older than me, solid jaw, the kind of confident that comes from never having been doubted. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old teammates. Lena, still doing the building thing. Architecture, yeah, cool, cool. Still the small firm? Still the firm. He nodded the way people nod when they're already thinking about their next sentence. Smart to keep it small. Less risk. You know, I keep telling my brother he should get into something stable. Real estate. Finance. Something with a clear path. He looked at me like he was offering me something. Architecture's creative, but the ceiling's low unless you're doing like skyscrapers, right? I took a sip of my drink. Not necessarily. He smiled and moved on to find someone more enthusiastic to talk to. I sat with that for a few minutes. The ceiling's low. I thought about the meeting I'd had in April, the one where two partners from a mid-sized development group based in Boston had flown to our office specifically to talk about acquiring our firm. I thought about the number they put on a piece of paper and slid across the conference table. I thought about how Omar had grabbed my arm in the elevator after they left and said, Lena, Lena, are you breathing? I was breathing fine. I just didn't know what to say yet. We closed the deal in June, $14 million, plus a continued creative leadership role for both of us, plus equity in 3 upcoming projects that had already broken ground. After taxes, after Omar's share, and yes, Omar got his full half. I want to be clear about that. We built this together. I had more money sitting in accounts than my parents had earned in their entire combined careers. I hadn't told them, not because I was ashamed, not even because I wanted to surprise them. I hadn't told them because I'd spent years trying to share my life with people who'd already decided what my life was, and I was tired of translating myself into language they could receive. The plan had been to get through the holiday, eat the cheesecake, drive home. The plan changed around 3 in the afternoon. They'd moved into the backyard speeches portion of the day. My uncle tapped a plastic fork against his cup and called for attention. He talked about Derek's promotion for 4 minutes. 4 actual minutes. He mentioned the salary increase. He mentioned the company car. He said this kid has always known how to chase the right thing and looked at Derek the way fathers look at sons in movies about legacy. My mom caught my eye from across the yard and gave me a small smile, the kind that said, "Isn't this nice?" And I smiled back because it was, and because Derek did work hard, and because none of this was his fault either. But then they sat back down, and Derek leaned over to me and said, in the easy, careless way of someone who'd never had to measure their words around me, "You should think about getting out of the small pond, Lena. I'm serious. I can connect you with some people if you ever want to make a real move." The small pond. I thought about the conference room in Boston. I thought about the contract with my signature on it. I thought about the email I'd gotten the week before from an architecture publication that wanted to feature our firm's work in a piece about reshaping regional design. I looked at my cheesecake. I looked at Derek, and I heard myself say, calm as anything, "Actually, I just sold my firm." He turned toward me slowly. "What?" "Voss and Callum. We sold to a development group in Boston." Closed in June. He laughed a little, the way people laugh when they're not sure if they've misheard. Oh yeah? That's great. How much do you get for something like that? And here's where I made a choice. A deliberate choice, informed by years of watching what happened when people found out someone they'd underestimated had money. I didn't say the number. Not right then. Enough, I said, and watched his face do something complicated. Enough like a few 100,000, or enough that I don't need career advice. I said it lightly, not cruelly, but clearly. Derek stared at me for a second. Then my aunt, who'd been half listening from two lawn chairs over, said, "Wait, Lena, what do you mean you sold your firm?" And that's how the afternoon actually started. My mom materialized from somewhere near the potato salad. "What's going on?" "Lena sold her company," Derek said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. A recalibration. My mom looked at me. "You sold Voss and Callum?" "In June," I said. She sat down. Just sat down in the nearest empty chair like the air went out of her. "Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about the question. I thought about all the dinners where I'd try to explain what my firm did and watched eyes glaze over. I thought about the Christmas 3 years ago when I'd mentioned we'd been shortlisted for a significant project, and my mom had said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then immediately asked Gwen about a callback she was waiting on. "I'm telling you now," I said, "but we're your family." "You are," I said, "and I love you. But you've never once asked me the name of the building I'm most proud of. You came to Gwen's regional choir competition 4 years in a row, and you have never been to a single project opening." My mom looked like I'd said something in a language she didn't have. "We didn't know you wanted us there," she said. "I didn't know I had to ask," I said back. Gwen was watching from a few feet away. She hadn't moved closer. She looked uncomfortable in a way that told me she'd already known, on some level, that this imbalance existed. That's the thing about the person everyone orbits. They can see the orbit, too. They just don't always know what to do about it. My dad cleared his throat. "So what does this mean? Are you out of architecture now?" "No. I have a leadership role with the group that acquired us. I'll still be designing. But the firm is gone." "The firm was the point. You build something and you sell it when the price is right, and you build the next thing." He nodded slowly. "How much did they pay?" I looked at him, looked at Derek, who was pretending to find something interesting in his cup, looked at my aunt, who had the good grace to look a little embarrassed about her eavesdropping. "Enough that I don't need to borrow anything from anyone. Enough that I've already sorted out my future. Enough that what matters now isn't the number, it's what I do next." My dad looked at my mom. My mom looked at her hands. My uncle, who had not been part of the conversation up to this point, chuckled from his chair. "Well, didn't see that coming." Derek made a sound that might have been a laugh. He recovered fast, he's good at recovering, and reached over to put a hand on my arm. "That's genuinely great, Lena. I mean that." I think he did mean it, and I think it cost him something to say it, which is not nothing. But it was my mom's face I couldn't stop watching. She had the look of someone doing math they should have done years ago, recounting things, repositioning things. I'd seen that look on her face before, but always about Gwen, always about some opportunity or some risk Gwen was taking, never about me. She reached for my hand across the armrest between our chairs. "Tell me about it," she said quietly. "Tell me about what you built." That stopped me. Not because it was a big gesture. It wasn't. It was 4 words and a hand on mine, and it probably came 15 years late. But I had been waiting for exactly that sentence for so long that hearing it felt strange, like a window opening in a room you'd forgotten had windows. I told her about the beginning, about Omar and I meeting in a graduate seminar, arguing for 2 hours about load-bearing walls and walking out as friends. About the first commission we got, a small dental office in Albany that we over-engineered and undercharged for because we needed the experience more than the money. About the Arts Center in Ohio. About the methodology we developed for designing spaces that worked for the humans inside them first and looked impressive. Second. She listened. actually listened, didn't check her phone, didn't redirect. Gwen pulled up a chair. She didn't say anything for a while, just listened to, and at some point, she put her head on my shoulder for about 30 seconds in the way she used to when we were kids, and she wanted to say something she didn't have words for. My dad said, "I didn't know you had a business partner. Omar's been my partner for 7 years." "I didn't know that," he said again. Not defensively, just plainly, like he was cataloging the things he'd missed. I should tell you that what came next wasn't a movie moment. Nobody cried in the backyard. Nobody made a speech. The fireworks started at dusk, and everyone shuffled toward the grass with their red cups, and I stood next to my mom and watched the sky crack open in pink and gold, and she held my elbow in the way she used to when I was small. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It wasn't resolution. It was more like the first sentence of a different story. The complicated part happened later. It always does. 2 weeks after the 4th, my dad called me. This was notable in itself because my dad and I had what I would generously describe as a voicemail relationship. He left them. I called back. We spoke for 4 to 7 minutes and hung up feeling vaguely like we'd done something polite. This time he just called. "I've been thinking," he said after we got through hello, about the fact that I told you architecture had a low ceiling." He paused. "I said that, I think, when you were choosing a major. Do you remember?" I remembered. "I thought I was being practical," he said. "I told your mother I was just being realistic with you because you could handle it, because you were always the one who could handle things." Another pause, longer this time. "I think I used that as an excuse to not pay as much attention, because you seemed fine, and Gwen needed more." I sat down on my kitchen floor. I don't know why, it just felt right. "I'm not going to pretend I handled either of you perfectly," he said. "I know I didn't. But I think I shortchanged you in a specific way that I've been sitting with since the barbecue." I didn't say anything. I was waiting to see where it went. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not because of the firm or the money. I don't want you to think I'm calling because of the money." "I know," I said. And I did know. My dad is many things, but he is not calculating. What he is oblivious, comfortably, genuinely, sometimes infuriatingly oblivious, and something had cracked that open. "Will you tell me more about what you built?" he asked. I'd like to understand it. That night, I sent him the architecture publication feature, the one that ran a photo of the Ohio Art Center on the front page. He texted back 20 minutes later. "This is beautiful. I mean it. I'm proud of you." I held my phone for a while before I typed back. My mom's reckoning was harder and took longer and came with more tears. We had a dinner, just the two of us, at a Thai restaurant she liked, and she told me things I hadn't expected her to say. She said she'd always assumed I was fine because I'd never shown her I wasn't. She said she leaned toward Gwen because Gwen made her need visible and I made mine invisible. She said, "I think I trained you to not need me, and then I used that as permission to not be there." I put down my fork. "That's not totally wrong," I said. She looked pained. "It's not entirely your fault either," I said. "I learned early that asking didn't get me anywhere, so I stopped asking. And then you stopped offering, and we both just let it become the shape of things." She cried a little. Not the kind that demands comfort, the kind that just happens when something true lands. I didn't reach across the table to fix it, but I didn't leave either. I let it sit the way you let a sore muscle rest instead of pushing through. "I want to know you," she said finally. "I know that sounds late. I know you probably have every reason to just." She stopped. "I just want you to know that I want to." "Then learn my work," I said. "That's where I am. That's who I am. Don't ask me about my social life or whether I'm seeing anyone. Ask me about the building." She nodded. She's been trying in the months since. She asks questions, sometimes the wrong ones, sometimes awkward ones, but she asks. She came to the groundbreaking for the first project I'm leading under the new firm, stood in a hard hat in the Connecticut mud, and took about 40 photos to send to her friends. She looked, for maybe the first time in my life, actually proud of me in real time. Not retroactively. Not in the generous revision people do when they realize they missed something. She looked present. Gwen and I talked about it once, the whole dynamic, in the direct way you can only talk to a sibling about the family you both came from. She said, I knew you were getting less. I didn't know how to say anything without it seeming like I was giving something back. I told her she didn't have anything to give back, that it wasn't her portion to redistribute. She said, That's easy for you to say now that you're loaded. And we both laughed, real laughter, the kind that acknowledges how messy the whole thing is without pretending the mess is clean. As for Derek, he texted me about 6 weeks after the 4th. He asked if I'd be interested in connecting with someone at his company who was overseeing a real estate development project that needed an architect. I said I appreciated it, but my pipeline was full. He sent back a thumbs up and then, after a minute, a separate message that just said, Genuinely impressive, Lena. For what it's worth, I said, Thanks, Derek. It's worth something. And that was true. Here's what I know now that I didn't know how to put into words when I was 22. Driving back from yet another family gathering, feeling like a ghost of myself, being overlooked doesn't mean you're not seen. It means the people who should have been paying attention were looking somewhere else. That's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their focus. I built Voss and Callum in the margins of my own life. In the hours between jobs and sleep, and the stubborn, quiet belief that what I was making mattered even when no one around me understood what it was, and I would have built it regardless. I want to be clear about that. I didn't build it to prove something to my family. I built it because it was mine, and because the work was real, and because Omar believed in it, and I believed in it, and that was enough. The money and what it revealed about the people around me was a side effect. What I learned, though, and this is the part I want you to sit with if any of this sounds familiar, is that being the easy one is a tax. Being the one who handles things, who doesn't need fussing over, who will be fine, is a role that sounds like a compliment and works like a cage. You hold yourself together so well that everyone else is freed from having to hold you at all. And then you spend years wondering why you feel so alone in rooms full of people who love you. You are allowed to take up space. You're allowed to say, loudly and without apology, that what you made is worth seeing. You don't have to wait for a selling price to make it real. Your work was real the whole time. So are you. I've thought a lot about why I didn't tell them sooner. Not just my parents, everyone. Why I drove a beat-up Civic to that barbecue instead of the car sitting in my garage. Why I carried the cheesecake in alone and didn't say a word when my mom pointed to the dessert table and walked away. The honest answer is that I'd learned, slowly and over many years, that sharing things with people who weren't paying attention didn't feel like sharing. It felt like talking to a wall and then blaming yourself for the echo. That's what being the easy one actually does to you. It teaches you to make yourself smaller and quieter and more contained, and it frames that shrinking as a virtue. You're so low maintenance, you're so steady, you don't cause problems. And you receive those words as praise for so long that you stop noticing they're also a sentence, a life sentence of being the person nobody needs to worry about, which means nobody does. What I understand now, and what I didn't have the language for at 22, at 25, even at 28, is that this wasn't just a family dynamic. It was a pattern I was actively participating in. Not because I was weak or compliant, but because somewhere early on I decided that needing things was dangerous, that asking and not receiving was worse than not asking at all. So I built walls I called independence, and I called it strength, and for a long time it was. It got me through school and through hard years and through the grinding early days of Voss and Callum when Omar and I were running on coffee and stubbornness. But walls don't just keep things out, they keep you in too. When Derek said the ceiling was low in architecture, he wasn't being malicious. He was doing what people do when they've decided who you are. He was reading from the script he'd been handed. My cousin, my parents, all of them had a version of me in their heads that they'd built out of incomplete information, and they'd stopped updating it years ago. That's not cruelty. It's just a kind of carelessness that compounds over time until it looks like neglect. The reason things shifted at that barbecue wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that. Money doesn't fix a family. It can't purchase attention retroactively or buy back the years someone spent feeling like the footnote in their own story. What shifted was that I finally stopped protecting them from the truth of what my silence had cost me. I said it plainly. You have never asked about my work. You have never shown up for what I built. And that plainness, not the sale price, not the acquisition, that's what cracks something open. My mom asking me to tell her about it meant something precisely because it was small. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was just 4 words and her eyes actually on me for once. And I realized that's all I had ever wanted. Not a trophy, not a speech, just someone in my family choosing to look. What Lena learned, what I learned, is that integrity isn't just about how you treat others. It's also about how honestly you let others see you. I had hidden myself behind capability for so long that the people closest to me genuinely didn't know me. That was partly on them. And partly on me. Owning that second part wasn't defeat. It was the beginning of something more honest than anything we'd managed before. You don't have to blow anything up to reclaim your space. But you do have to stop pretending the smallness doesn't cost you. It does. It always does. And the longer you wait to say so, the more it costs everyone.